Alright, continuing on with Unit 3.2, Lesson 3.2, we're going to go ahead and add some fractions together. Now remembering, when you're adding fractions together, you have to have common denominators. So if we take the cotangent of theta and we're going to add to that 1 over the cotangent of theta, remember both of these are fractions. The left cotangent theta over this has a denominator of 1. I don't want a denominator of 1. Why I'm doing this, I forgot to mention, is they said perform the operation. The operation says add. So I don't need this to be a 1. I need it to be cotangent theta. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply both top and bottom by cotangent theta. Why I'm doing this is cotangent theta times 1 is cotangent theta. On top, cotangent theta times cotangent theta is cotangent square of theta. We square the trig function, not the angle, plus 1 over cotangent theta. When we add fractions, we add the numerators, the top, and we leave the denominators alone. Now when I'm looking at this cotangent squared theta plus 1, that looks like one of my Pythagorean identities from lesson 3.1. And if we look at it, it is. 1 plus cotangent squared theta plus 1 can actually be rewritten as cosecant squared theta. What I did is I looked up my Pythagorean identities from 3.1 and I took this and I rewrote it like that. And that's going to be over cotangent theta. Now we're looking at this and we're like, okay, well that might be done, except the instructions say no quotients. We can't have fractions in my answers. So cosecant squared is really 1 over sine squared. Cosecant squared is 1 over sine squared theta, and I am dividing that by cotangent theta, which is cotangent theta, if you remember, is cosine over sine. So I'm going to multiply it by the reciprocal of that, sine theta over cosine theta, because, let me write it out so we can see it, cotangent theta is cosine theta over sine theta. When we divide with fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal. And what I'm seeing down here now is this sign, one of these signs is going to cross out with one of these signs. And we are going to be left with 1 over sine theta cosine theta. Well, I can't do anything more with this, but the instructions said no fractions. So what we're really saying here is 1 over sine and 1 over cosine theta. Well, 1 over sine theta becomes cosecant theta, and 1 over cosine theta is secant theta. So there's my final answer. Boom. When we get together tomorrow in class, I want to do this one together. I want to go ahead and add these fractions together when we get to class. This one, though, I'm going to do on the video because this is worth putting out on the video. Again, to perform this operation, we want to subtract these fractions. To subtract fractions, they must have common denominators. So we're going to take the first one, 1 over 1 plus cosine x minus 1 over 1 minus cosine x. The denominators are not the same. One says plus, one says minus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the left fraction by the right denominator. So I'm going to do 1 times 1 minus cosine x. So on top, I'm going to have 1 minus cosine x, and on bottom, we get the denominator 1 plus cosine x times 1 minus cosine x. This numerator, this numerator is going to be, we're subtracting, 1 times 1 plus cosine x, which gives me 1 plus cosine x. We're going to distribute the negative through, so 1 minus 1 is 0. Negative cosine x minus cosine x gives me negative 2 cosine x. And that's going to be over, I'm going to go ahead and multiply these together. So 1 times 1 is 1, minus cosine x plus cosine x. Cosine x times cosine x plus and a minus gives me negative cosine squared x. The two terms in the middle are going to cross out, so in the denominator I'm left with 1 over cosine squared x. And on top we have negative 2 cosine x. So far so good. Well, 1 minus cosine squared x, that's a Pythagorean identity. So 1 minus cosine squared x, if you look at our identities on 3.1, that gives me sine squared x. So the fraction I'm left with now is negative 2 cosine x over sine squared x. And I'm pretty happy with this, except we're not allowed to have quotients. We're not allowed to have fractions. So what I need to do is I need to change this so I can write it as one trig function, a sine, a cosine, a tangent, a cosecant, whatever. So I'm going to separate my numerator out. I have a negative 2 and I have a cosine x. And then sine squared x, I'm going to write as sine x and sine x. Because what I notice here, right here, cosine x over sine x becomes cotangent x. Cosine over sine is cotangent. So what I've got is a negative 2. 1 over sine becomes cosecant x. Cosine x over sine x is cotangent x. And that has now been simplified. Doesn't look simplified, that looks very complicated, but it has been. So we will do example 3 and moving on, but that is how we add fractions with trig.